Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Karen Bufka and I'm here with Dr. Brian Ricca, St. Johnsbury School Superintendent. We're going to chat a little bit about the proposed bond to raise money to fund improvements to the St. Johnsbury Schools building. Because St. Johnsbury voters have to approve the bond in order for it to happen, we're going to go over the facts so that you can make an informed vote on or before Tuesday, November 5th. First, let me briefly explain why I'm doing this interview. I am a member of the League of Women Voters in the Northeast Kingdom. We're the local chapter of the national nonpartisan volunteer organization open to people of all genders, which encourages the active and informed participation of citizens in government. We're just volunteers helping to make our democracy work better. I'm interviewing Dr. Ricca so that both you and I can learn more about the proposed bond in order to feel well informed when we cast our votes on or before Tuesday, November 5th. Dr. Ricca, the proposed bond will provide $3 million so that the St. Johnsbury School can make improvements to the school's building, specifically a heating system addition and upgrade and building mechanical upgrades and replacements. Could you please fill us in on the details?
Absolutely, and I want to say, Karen, thank you for having me. So we are in a position where there are 3 boilers that the St. Johnsbury School uses to heat the building. One of them is not functioning, so we are down to 2 boilers, and we know that given where we are in the state of Vermont and in the corner of New England that we're in, we need an excellent heating system. Especially for those very cold days in December and January. So we are looking to do a biomass change. We're looking to have a new boiler that would accept either wood pellets or wood chips. We would keep our original boiler that is heated with oil, and that would give us all kinds of options going forward in terms of the best way, the most efficient way to heat our building for our students, faculty, staff, and families. The other upgrades that you're referring to are for the actual control systems for the boilers themselves and our heating system. And it's important, Karen, to note that everyone who has done work for us in terms of prep work for this bond has spoken eloquently about how well all of the adults, certainly led by Patrick Campbell, our Director of Facilities, and the great folks at Kingdom Cleaners, how well we have stewarded the building for the past 20 years. None of these bond projects are related to neglect or malfeasance or failure to keep up. But if you think about it, that building's about 20 years old. If you had a furnace in your house that was about 20 years old, this would be about the time that you need to make adjustments as a homeowner. And so it's important for our folks to know this is not frivolous. This is really something that we need when it comes to the basics of heating our school building. The other part of the project that is important and couldn't have been conceived of 20 years ago when the school was built, we were looking to do some safety upgrades. Currently, when you walk into our building, we do have a controlled access point where you are buzzed in and you do need to make contact with a receptionist, visual contact as well as speak to our receptionist. But if you've ever been in the St. Johnsbury School, once you're in that first door, there are a number of places that you could go before you actually meet up with our receptionist. You could pass a stairwell that goes up to one of our gyms. You could pass the auditorium. You could pass the band room, the cafeteria. There are a number of bathrooms. So there are a lot of places that, unfortunately, if someone was intent on coming to do us harm and was let into the building, we would be really struggling to find that individual. So the hope is that with this bond, we would restructure that front area that would give us what I'm calling a catch area. So somebody could be buzzed into a vestibule that would then also be controlled by the receptionist. And there would be a secondary door that folks would have to go through in order to get further access into the building. And if you think about it, when the school building was constructed in the early 2000s, the unfortunate reality that we see now of school shootings and school violence really was not on the horizon. There had only been 1 or 2. And as we all know, unfortunately, it is a portion of our landscape that as a human being, a dad of children, a husband, and ultimately as a superintendent for all the children in St. Johnsbury, I'm responsible for making sure that our students are safe first and foremost. So the hope is, again, that with this very practical project, we will have a building that still is warm and friendly and doesn't feel like anything substantially different than the way that it does now, but gives us as adults a little more control in terms of who can access our building, because currently we don't have that.
Oh, thank you. I read it in black and white, but it's really good to hear you describe it in detail in person. Is it unusual for a school district to issue a bond to finance projects?
So in my experience, it's not. When I was serving as superintendent at another district in Vermont, we had 2 bonds during my tenure that the community weighed in on. It's really the most reasonable way that we can ask for a large amount of money and then spread the payments over 20 years. In this case, if the bond goes through, we've done some estimates, and the interesting thing about a bond is we wouldn't actually start paying for it, not even next year, but in 2 budget seasons from now. So right now we're planning for our budget that will begin July 1st of 2020 and will end June 30th of 2021. That's the full next school year. Okay. If the bond passes, we don't actually start making principal payments until the following year. So that would give us 2 years to plan for these additional expenses that we would incur. And the reality is, when you're looking for $3 million, you really don't want to put it all into your local budget right away. You would like to take this infrastructure payment schedule that the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank offers us and spread the payments over 20 years. Now, the next part that I'm going to share, which is what probably almost everyone at home is wondering, is how much is it going to cost? I do have a simple answer, but I want to give a thoughtful explanation. Because we can't figure what our budget is going to be for next year, we're doing estimates based on our current funding. Our current funding this year, we're roughly a budget of about $21.3 million or so. Given that the original bond to build the current structure will be ending the same year, 2022, FY22, that we will begin principal payments for this new bond that's proposed, the difference in the bond that we are retiring and the additional funding that we are asking for is $85,000. So we're asking for an additional $85,000. We added that into our current budget of $21.3 or so million. And for the average homeowner in town, and when I worked with Chad Whitehead on last year's budget, he told me that he was using figures for the St. Johnsbury town budget for a house value of about $150,000. That individual would be looking at 12 to 13 additional dollars per year for the next 20 years. If you're on the higher end, if there's property values that are higher than that, you'd be looking at maybe closer to $15 per year. And of course, that doesn't take into account people who are income sensitized or who don't pay based off of their property taxes. They base it only off of their income. So while I can give you a number, and again, I know that that's probably what folks are looking for, what's the bottom line? How is this going to impact me? All the caveats that go with that are it's based off of this year's property tax estimates, and I won't be able to give an actual number on what it might look like in subsequent years until we settle our budgets in the coming budget season.
But I'm impressed that you're planning to, it's so clear that you're planning to absolutely minimize the impact that it would have on anybody's tax bill while maximizing the value function of the building for these really necessary purposes.
And that is exactly what we're trying to do, and that's also the rationale for going out in November as opposed to the traditional time for town meeting day. We're one of the only school districts that I know of that are going out for a bond vote on Tuesday, November 5th. I did speak to another colleague last week who informed me that his district is going out for a bond, I think he told me on December 5th, so a full month later. The rationale for going out in November, there's a 30-day reconsideration period after any public vote for recounts or any errors to be brought to the attention of the municipality. hopefully there won't be one, but we have the 30-day reconsideration period. If the bond vote passes favorably and there are no hiccups during the reconsideration period, we would be able to take advantage of the earliest interest rates in December from the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. It's important for folks to know a lot of the estimates that we have even just quoted for you, we're using some higher interest rates. That was before the Fed had actually started to move the prime interest rate down. So as we get closer to the actual events, we will update those numbers. So we expect a more favorable interest rate in December. The other thing that's really important for folks to understand is we would then be able to put out requests for proposals for contractors right when 2020 hits, right in January. Typically at that time, there are not a lot of requests for proposals going out to contractors. In my experience, then we're going to get the best rates on labor. Parts and supplies, we really don't have a firm handle on, and we're never going to be able to control those. But if we're one of the only school districts that's going to be able to go out for requests for proposals in January, I really believe we're going to get some of the best labor rates that Vermont has to offer at that time. Even my colleague that's going out in December will be a month beyond us, and certainly any of my colleagues that are going out for bonds in March would have to wait that additional 30-day reconsideration, and so they would be going out in April. So not only would we be getting favorable labor rates from contractors, we would be getting favorable interest rates from the bond bank. We're really trying to demonstrate to the community that we're being as thoughtful as we possibly can and stretching every dollar to its fullest. And so that's part of the reason for going out this early for the bond vote.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful. Has St. Johnsbury done a bond before, do you know?
So I've done a little bit of research, and it seems that the only bond that's on our debt service right now is the one for the building that we're currently in that is set to expire in the 2021-22 school year, which is, if all things go well, when we would begin paying interest. So our current building was the result of a bond, which is, again, not unusual when you're talking about construction of that magnitude.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Well,
you're welcome.
I've been learning about, bonds have been very unfamiliar for me,
Sure.
and I'm probably not alone in that. But the more I hear about them, the more I realize that they're happening all the time, and they're a win-win for communities, both to have money available to make improvements happen within their structures, but then also it's an opportunity to invest in Vermont, people who are, buying the bonds, but that's another matter. But, this is all a learning curve for me. So if you don't know about bonds, you're not alone. I'm in that club too. So thank you, Dr. Ricca, for educating me. So what about any additional funds becoming available from the state of Vermont or the federal government to fund this project?
So there's always hope that that could come to fruition, and I do know that there were rumblings in the last legislative session here in the state of Vermont about turning attention to returning to construction aid from the state for schools to do this. There's been a moratorium on state assistance for construction aid as long as I've been superintendent, and I began in the superintendency in 2011. While I'm certainly hopeful, and our bond articles are written in such a way that if money does become available, it will be immediately used to defray the costs further for the town of St. Johnsbury if this is indeed approved. I would say that given a lot of what I hear is downward pressure and talk about education spending in the state of Vermont, I wouldn't necessarily think that in the very next legislative session we would be looking at a substantial change in the state's attitude towards construction aid. That said, I'm very hopeful, and that certainly would be a way for folks to help local school districts defray some of these costs. However, it would then put pressure in other areas of our state and in other areas of our state government if the state is dedicating more public funds to construction in public schools. I will say this building that we're currently in is a 20-year-old building. It's been kept up incredibly well. I feel very fortunate to serve in a district where We're not looking at crumbling walls. We're not looking at infrastructure, substantial infrastructure needs. We're looking at what you would expect of a really well-maintained 20-year-old building. And again, that's a credit to Patrick Campbell and his folks who are on staff at the St. Johnsbury School, as well as the folks from Kingdom Cleaners, and ultimately all of the faculty and staff and all of the community for really helping to maintain a wonderful place for education in St. Johnsbury.
Well, I think we've run through all my questions, so really, if there's any other information
Sure.
that you'd like to share?
Sure. So for the public, there will be 2 walkthroughs that are coming up that we would invite everyone who's interested in actually seeing what type of work we're proposing to do for our bond. The first is on Wednesday, October 16th from 5 to 6 o'clock. Folks can come right to the main entrance of the school. Our architect will be there, I will be there, members of the board will be there, and we really want to answer your questions. As Karen mentioned in the beginning, it's really important for the school board that an informed public makes an informed decision on the work that we are trying to do. And nothing gets better than being able to make an informed decision by being present and actually seeing the space and the work for yourselves. Being able to ask questions of the architect, being able to ask questions of the board or myself. I did mention that there will be 2. The second one will be on Monday, October 28th. Same time, 5 to 6 o'clock, same meeting space, the entrance to the school. Again, the architect will be present, members of the board will be present, and I will be present. The most important thing for us is that everyone in St. Johnsbury feels as though we have reached out in as many different ways as we can to share as much information with you, the voters, and our community about the impact of this bond. The reality is we are going to need to do something to address the heating system in our building. That is going to happen. We currently have 1 boiler that's not functioning. The most effective way, the way that would impact the taxpayers' wallets and pocketbooks in the least amount possible is by going through a bond. If we have to take either an emergency loan out from a commercial bank or if we have to put more repairs into our local budget, that will negatively impact our taxes in our community in a greater way. This is by far the most effective and efficient way to do these needed repairs. It's also important for folks to know I'm not trying to sway anyone's vote in any way. I'm strictly prohibited by trying to tell any member of the public for any public vote how they should vote. However, it is incumbent upon me as the superintendent to be able to share the facts and to allow you as the voters to make the most informed decision. So circling back, Wednesday, October 16th, 5 to 6 o'clock at the main entrance of our school building, and then again on Monday, October 28th, 5 to 6 o'clock at the main entrance of our school building. And if anyone has questions, further questions about the bond or any of the projects that are coming up, you should certainly feel welcome to reach out to me. I can be reached at 802-745-2789. My email address is B as in Brian, RICCA @stjsd.org. And again, my commitment to you as members of the public is that you are as well informed as you can be so that you can make a vote that is based off of facts, not just off of opinions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ricca. And it occurred to me there's also an informational meeting the night before the actual vote. So St. Johnsbury voters need to cast their votes either on Tuesday, November 5th, where you would go to the St. Johnsbury School and the polls will be open from 10 a.m. till 7 p.m., or you can vote early or absentee, and that's super easy to do. You can go to the town clerk's office or contact them and they'll get a ballot to you. But this informational meeting the night before on Monday, November 4th at 7 o'clock, right?
Correct.
At the St. Johnsbury School, and that's a great way to be able to ask questions
Absolutely.
and hear the facts again.
Absolutely.
If you haven't voted early, then you can vote the next day on Tuesday, November 5th from 10 to 7 at the school. So I think this video of the walkthrough, that if you can't make it to the walkthrough, there will be a video that Kingdom Access TV is also going to make available.
Yes.
So that's a way to go
Yes.
anytime.
That's right.
It's through the building with
That's
the
right.
tour. So thank you, Kingdom Access TV, and
Indeed.
thank you, Dr. Ricca, for helping us to know what's going on in our school and how we can help. Sounds like to be informed and to
Indeed.
make an informed vote.
Indeed. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody.